Hello guys, welcome to the Python series on LearnIn. In today's lesson, we are going to talk about built-in functions in Python. But before we go to built-in functions, it is important that we know what functions are. What is a function? A function is simply a reusable block of code that performs a specific task. Functions allow you to organize your code into modular units, making it easy to understand, maintain, and reuse. That sounds like a lot. All I am saying here is that it is possible for us to put together a set of instructions to perform a specific task. And that would be a function written by us. Now, while we are able to write and use our own functions, Python already provides us with a set of functions. And this set of functions provided by Python are called built-in functions. These built-in functions are predefined and ready to use without having to create them ourselves. In this lesson, like I earlier said, we will be concentrating on built-in functions. Later on, in our upcoming lessons, we will explore the process of writing our own functions. Some of the built-in functions in Python include print function, type function, which we have already seen from our previous videos. If you would like to see these previous videos, the links are provided in the description. There is also the help function and many other functions. I would want us to quickly visit the Python documentation on built-in functions, and we would see the many built-in functions that Python has provided for us. So for that, head over to the Python documentation on built-in functions. I have provided this link in the description. Now, as you can see here, we have lots of built-in functions in Python. However, we are only going to talk about a few of these built-in functions. If you would want to read about any of these built-in functions, you can visit this link and you will have the functions shown just like this. To read about just any one of them, all you have to do is go to the function that you want to read about and click on it, like we're clicking on Learn now. Notice that it opens this description of the Learn function. It says here that it returns the length of an object. Length is the number of items. So it says here return the length, that would be the number of items of an object. It goes further to say that the argument may be a sequence such as a string, byte, tuple, list, or range, or a collection such as a dictionary, set, or frozen set. Now, I know for sure that we have not talked about arguments in this series yet. We've talked about string. We have not talked about bytes, tuple, list, or range. We have not talked about dictionary, sets, or even frozen sets. Do not worry your head about any of those right now. We will get to them as we progress. The idea of this Python series is to map out various Python concepts in a gradual process such that you get to learn them in tiny bits. That being said, let's head over to VS Code and see how to use some of these built-in functions. Let's see how to use the learn function. So from the definition of the len function provided here in the Python documentation, you can see that the len function can be used on a string, can be used on byte, tuple, list, range, and so on. Because string is familiar to us, in this lesson we are going to see how to apply the len function using a string. Let's go back to VS Code. Let's declare a string. Let's use this MSG that we have been using, and let's set it to hello world. Now we have our string hello world stored in this message variable. So we are going to apply the len function. Now notice that these built-in functions have parentheses just like this. It is very important to note this syntax. So it is within this parenthesis that we are going to write our variable, and let's save. Now remember that we need to print this for us to be able to see an output. Now if I run this code just by clicking this run button, you are going to see that nothing is output here on the terminal. So for us to see the length of MSG variable displayed on the terminal, we have to use the print function. I want to store this length in a variable and then print that variable. So I'm just going to say MSG underscore length like this, and I'm going to set it to len MSG. This MSG length holds this value, and this value now is the length of our variable here. So now that we have it displayed like this, let's print it. I would say print and have this in the print parenthesis. Let's save and let us run this code. Now if you look here on the terminal, you are going to notice that we have 12 displayed here, and 12 is the length of hello world. The number of characters on hello world amounts to 12. If you would care, let's count. H is 1, E is 2, L 3, 4, second L, O is 5. Remember that the white space always counts, so plus this space 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. So if you would care to count it manually, just so that we understand what we are doing here, you would have 12 returned to us. I feel the need to re-emphasize that white space counts, as well as punctuation marks. Like we have this white space here, and we have this punctuation mark, the exclamation mark here. Now if you count the actual letters that you see here, you would see that it comes to 10 letters, but we have 12 displayed to us here. That shows to us that this empty space here, which is called white space, and this exclamation mark here, which is a punctuation mark, counts also. I hope that you get the point. Now another reason I decided to manually count the characters on hello world is because I want us to notice that while I was counting it, I did not start with 0. I started with 1. Now in our previous lessons, we talked about indexing, and then we said that indexing starts counting at 0. Now the length function, this len function here, does not use indexing. Remember that while we used indexing, the first character of our string was 0. But now that we are using length, the first character is 1. So the length function typically returns the number of elements in a sequence, which is an absolute count. Absolute count starts from 1, not 0. It is very important for us to note that. Understand and be very conscious when you are using the length function. Remember that it is going to start counting from 1. While you are using indexing, remember that counting is going to start from 0. So now what this means is that the highest index would be length minus 1. In this case, we have hello world, which length is 12, as we have seen here. If we want to get the highest index, we have to subtract 1 from the length. Let's have another variable. Let's have it as this, and let's subtract 1 from it. And of course, we want to print it as well. So we have print MSG index just like this. Let's save and let's run this code. Let me clear the terminal and then run the code again, just so that we see more clearly. So notice that when we have 12 as length, the highest index is 11. If we print the character at 11, remember from our previous lesson, we saw that we could print the last character of a string. Let's have the variable here. Our variable is MSG in this case, and then we have square brackets, and let's print the character at 11. Of course, we will save and let's run the code. Notice here that we have exclamation mark returned to us here, and that shows that the exclamation mark is the 11th character of the string hello world. So I want us to note that the highest index is going to be length of the string minus 1. It is important to note that. The next built-in function that we want to talk about today is the input function. Input function is used to prompt the user for an input, and it returns the entered value as a string. Let's see how it works. I have this line of code that I already typed and commented out, so I'm going to uncomment it. So right now we have age is equal to this input function with the prompt, how old are you? Let's quickly head over to the docs. So notice here in the documentation, that's what I just called docs, I'm sorry. But notice here in the documentation that the parenthesis of the input function has prompt in it. This is telling us that when you are using the input function, provide a prompt. Now, a prompt in this case can be what information you're trying to collect from the user or some sort. Let's see, let's go back to VS Code. So in this case, our prompt is how old are you? We want the user to enter how old he is. If we run this code on the terminal, you're going to see that we have how old are you? And right here on the same terminal too, you can see that we have this cursor indicating that the user can type something into it. I just want to type 18. Now let's hit enter. If we hit enter, nothing happens. But we can use the result of this input function here in doing something else. The result of this input function is stored in age, and we are going to concatenate I am plus age. Remember our concatenation from the previous lesson, plus years old. So we can have it written like this. And just before I go ahead to running this code, I want to point out that in this print function, I have I am wrapped in quotation marks. That is a string. Now I have age without quotation marks. That is because age is a variable here. So if you even place your mouse pointer over it, you're going to see VS Code tell you that age is a variable and it is a string. That's the str up there showing that it's a string. And then we have years old, because years old is not a variable, it's a string. We are using it in the print function as a string. I am going to come back to explaining this more deeply just in a bit. For now, let's run this code. I'm going to clear the terminal because I want us to see very clearly. Okay, so let's run the code. It says, how old are you? I'm going to type in 18 and I'm going to hit the enter key of my keyboard. Notice that it says I am 18 years old, even though it is funnily written because I did not introduce a space. I need to introduce spaces between them. In this case, you can simply just create a space between am and the closing quotation marks. Let's save and run the code again. It prompts again, how old are you? I'm going to type 18 again. I'm going to hit enter. Now notice that we have I am 18 years old. So that's how to use the input function. So basically the input function is going to prompt the user and it's going to allow the user to respond, and the response can be put to use, just like we've seen here. Okay, so back to explaining what really is going on in here. While we have some characters wrapped with quotation marks and we do not have some wrapped with quotation marks. For that, I'm going to have to comment this out, and I am going to declare a variable and I am going to set it to age, just like this. I have to clear the terminal. So I'm going to write two print statements. I'm going to write print age, and I am going to write again, I'm going to write print age. Now I have print age on line 26 and I also have print age on line 27. Do take note that the age on line 26 is not wrapped with quotation marks, whereas the age on line 27 is wrapped with quotation marks. Now let me run the code and you are going to see what is displayed on the terminal. On the terminal here, notice that we have 18 displayed first and we have age displayed after it. So that shows that print on line 26 was executed first before the print statement on line 27. So the print statement on line 26 gives the output of 18, while the print statement on line 27 gives the output of age. Even though we have age in the two cases, let me explain what is going on here. When you use quotes around your characters, that character is going to be considered a string. So because we have age on line 27 wrapped with quotes, Python sees this age and considers it a string. So what this line of code now comes to, what line 27 now comes to, is print out the string age. That is why we have age printed here. Now for the case of line 26 has age that is not wrapped with quotes. So in this case, age is considered a variable. So when you have to use a variable in the parentheses of a built-in function, you do not have to wrap the variable with quotes. You write it just the way it is without quotes. As we have here, age is written here on line 26 without quotes. So in this case, the data that we are working with is the value that is being stored in the variable. And in this case, the value that is stored in our age variable is 18. So that is why printing age here without quotation marks outputs 18 on the terminal. I hope that you get the point. If you have any comments or questions, do say them in the comment section. The next inbuilt functions that I want to talk about are the str, the int, and the float. Str converts a value to a string data type. Int converts a value to an integer data type. Float converts a value to a floating point number. Now notice that these three functions have one thing in common, which is convert. That is because these three functions are used for conversion from one data type to another. By this, I mean that you can convert a string value to an integer. You can convert an integer to a float and so on. Such conversions are called typecasting. So, typecasting is the conversion from one data type to another. So, let's see how this works. We are starting with the str function, and we want to use 10. Based on what we have learned so far, we know that 10 is an integer. Integers are positive or negative whole numbers. And now we are trying to convert 10 to a string. To do that, we are using this str function. Remember, we said that the str function is going to convert a value to a string data type. So in this case, our value is 10. So we want to convert 10 to a string and then store the value in this val variable. Just for us to see very, very clearly, I have decided to print the type of val that would show us the type that we get when we have 10 in this str function. Okay, so now let's run the code. Notice here on the terminal that for line 34, where we are only printing the type of 10, we have int returned to us. That means that 10 is an integer. Now, after we did the conversion using this str function, we now have str returned as the data type. Str represents string in this case. So this shows that we have been able to convert 10 from integer to a string data type. I hope that that is clear. So we can take one more example. I'm going to comment this out so that it's not too busy for us. In this example, we have 10.00 and we are doing a conversion using this str function too. And at the end of the conversion, we want to print the type of the value that we get after the conversion. So let's run this code. Notice that before we did the conversion, we printed the type of 10.00 and here we have float returned to us as the type. And then we came on line 42, we did the conversion using str function and we stored the value inside this val variable and printing the type of the value, which is this val variable, gives us str, which means string. So we have just been able to convert 10.00 from a floating point number to the string data type. I hope that we get the point. Okay, so we also have int. Int function converts a value to an integer. So in this example, we are going to see how to convert a float into an integer, and we are going to use the int built-in function. So we have our code set out like this. So on line 50, we are simply trying to print the type of 10.00. We already know it's a float. And on line 52, we are converting 10.00 into an integer using the int built-in function, and we are storing the value in this VAL variable. And on line 54, we are printing the type of val. The type of val now is going to show the data type that we get after converting 10.00 into an integer. So let's run this code. And look here on the terminal, you're going to see that before the conversion, 10.00 was a float, and after the conversion, 10.00 is an integer. I hope that you get the point. So far, we have been able to use the str function. We have also used the int function. Now let's use the float built-in function. We know that float would convert a value to a floating point number, or you can just say would convert a value to a float. In our example here, we have 10, and 10 is clearly a string because we have this quotation marks wrapped, but we are still going to print the type so that it is going to be displayed to us on the terminal, and we will be doubly sure that 10 is a string. And we are converting 10, this string 10, to a float using this float function, and we are printing the data type that we have after the conversion. So let's run this code, and notice here that we have str, which means string, to float. So we have been able to convert from string to float using the float function. And that's it for typecasting. The last built-in function that I will be talking about today is the help function. So the help function is a built-in function that provides interactive help and documentation about Python. So it allows you to access the documentation and information in Python. So for example, if we wanted to know what the print function does, we would use the help function, and we would just simply type help, and we would put print in the help parentheses just like this. Now let us save and let's run this code. If you look here on the terminal, you are going to see that information is provided to us about what print is. It basically just shows what the print function does. We could say we need help with str. Let's save and let's run this code. Notice that it provides information about what str does, and you can read here that str creates a new string object from the given object. It tells us what str does. So feel free to use the help function when you need help with a concept in Python. For more about built-in functions in Python, you might want to visit Python documentation website and read about built-in functions. The link is provided in the description. So you can see that it's a lot of built-in functions here. You do not have to memorize it all. You can always visit this documentation and pick out any of these built-in functions depending on your need. So with this, we have come to the end of today's lesson. I do hope that you found this lesson very helpful. If you have any questions or comments, Please say them in the comment section. Also, remember to like and share the video as well as subscribe to Learn In. Thank you for watching. See you in the next lesson. Also, if you are interested in the source code, I have provided the link in the description.